Welcome to the Susan Brender Show. It's all about you. Featuring shows on health and wellness, the performing arts, politics, and people who inspire you to be your very best. And now, here's Susan Brender.
I'm Susan Brender, and this is the Susan Brender Show. Today, I always talk about my guests, and I say it's always a privilege to have them on the show. Now, this is a guest I'm really excited about because she's funny, and we love funny people. Now, I want to welcome to the show Kat Simmons, a 27-year veteran of the International Comedy Club circuit. Now, you may have seen her on the Improvs, Catching a Rising Star, the Comedy Channel, Fox Comedy Tonight, and Candid Camera. And let me tell you something, just even saying that is making me think, uh-oh, here we go. Invite Kat Simmons to make us laugh. So, welcome to our show.
There we go. We're off and laughing. Good morning, Susan. How are you doing?
Well, you know something, I'm doing just fine because I recognize how laughter makes a difference in my life. And I just had a very funny story, but I prefer to have you tell the funny story. So now what I want to know, Kat, is when did you realize that you were a funny person? And how did you display that? How did you show it?
Well, there's a difference between realize I was funny looking and funny, right? Because I always felt funny looking as a kid because I have red hair. I had red hair and freckles, and I didn't feel like I fit in or look like anyone else because when you're a redhead, you just kind of stand out. So I think that maybe comedy even became a little bit of a coping mechanism for me in school, although I didn't even realize I was funny until many years later. I had a friend of mine that sat right in front of me in homeroom. And this is one of the greatest compliments about using humor that I think I've ever received. Mm-hmm. And it didn't come from a big show. It came from a very scared little girl who got transferred to my junior high school, and her name was Paula Pascucci. And she sat right in front of me in the homeroom. And she was very short, under 5 feet. And I just befriended her, and every day I would make her laugh a little bit. Now, I'd forgotten all about this. And then, I'd see her, 15, 20, 30 years later, and she'd say, every time she'd see me, you made me feel so comfortable. You made me feel so welcome, and you were so funny. So I guess I didn't really realize I was so funny in school until later when people said, oh, yeah, you go back to those reunions and people go, oh, you were a crack up because I was feeling insecure with my own esteem issues and didn't really think that I was particularly funny. But then I think the first moment I realized the power of all that laughter I was a senior in high school, and we had a senior assembly, and we did a sketch. And I was in this sketch, and having that whole auditorium laugh at this silly sketch we did, I was like, I enjoy that feeling quite a bit. And then I went on to college, and I was in a sorority, and we had a lot of little sketches and fun things that we would do, and I just kind of kept getting the funny parts. Mm-hmm. And my mother was hysterical, and, we were great company. She would spur me on, and I'd spur her on, and but I guess I didn't really realize I was fully funny until the first, time I did comedy, until I did my first stand-up comedy night, and it was a stand-up comedy contest up at the Lakeside Inn in South Lake Tahoe, Nevada, state line actually. Right. And I had made a decision to go to Los Angeles because I wanted to be an actress. That's what I wanted to do first. I started doing theater, and I always got the funny part in the in our plays. And the first time I did anything like sort of semi-professionally, it wasn't a paid, but it was our community theater. Right. I was in a play called Don't Drink the Water, and I remember walking out on that stage, and it's this old CVIC hall we have here in Minden, Nevada, and creaky wooden floors and these big dusty burgundy curtains, and the first laugh I got, I was like, I am home. I don't know where this feeling in this place has been my whole life, but it was really then that I really realized that, gosh, I guess I am funny, and it makes me feel good to make people feel good, Yeah.
So, I'll tell you something. I wanted to share this with my audience. This was something that Lynn DeModica said about you. She said, you shared a unique view of a woman's life with such commitment, courage, and truth with all your inspirational humor. She said, we spent many hours working through every moment of North Bay spirit of Women's Girls Night Out. And the last part of this is, she said, you're extremely professional and a joy to work with. Now, I have a feeling that's really true, but here's what I wanted to know. Generally speaking, I've heard that comedians are really not so funny after they do their show. In fact, most of them are depressed, and this is a way for them to feel, good. Now, does that apply to you, or are you just? Oh
gosh, this is the big question. This is like, does every red hair have bad temper, right?
Right.
Right. Well, I think those stereotypes are. I don't think they apply to everyone. I don't think every comic had a horrible life and is depressed. Conversely, I also don't think people that feel good all the time get up in front of strangers and try to make them laugh for a paycheck. I think there is something a little quirky about most of us comics. I cannot speak for other comics. Mm-hmm. I know some comics who are so morbidly shy that the only time they feel in command of themselves is on stage, or comics who stutter. Or there's also singers that they stutter when they're having conversation, but when they're in their art, they're empowered. So they rise to a higher level of self-esteem when they're on stage. So they kind of go over the top of some of those things that don't work for them. I can say for me personally, I don't think this was on the interview questions here, Susan.
Okay. It doesn't matter.
That's okay. I would have to say, I just had this thought this morning as I was getting ready for this interview, and I have some really great jobs coming up. I feel so happy when I work. And when I don't work, I'm still happy. I'm not one of those comics that has to get on stage and has to get laughs every night. Mm-hmm. I will just say that I feel the most like my highest self when I'm on stage. And, now you're going to make me cry on the radio. Gosh.
Well, you're very lucky. I want to say that before.
Yeah.
Now, finish up. So when you get on the stage, when you get on the stage, something makes you feel that you have a purpose, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And I've been mothering. I've been a single mother for the last 15 years, and I haven't worked as much as I would like. I made a commitment to stay home with my kids and not travel. I've never stopped working. I'm always doing events, but I can't just get in the car and go away for weeks anymore. I have one more year left with my daughter, and then I can do that again. But I just had a very lucid moment a half an hour ago before this phone call. Like, I can feel my vibration, raising, because I know I'm going to be working. Mm-hmm. And when I work, I feel like I'm a conduit, when I'm on stage. Like, I really give it up to the cosmic soup, the powers that be, that I'm just me up there. Mm-hmm. And whatever comes through me comes from something much bigger and better than myself. Mm-hmm. It's a way to kind of check my ego. And I teach stand-up comedy classes, which we'll talk about later, but I teach my students that too. It's like, whatever's coming through you, just see yourself as a channel or a conduit, and then that way you can kind of put your fear aside and your ego aside and just ask to be of service. I just ask to be of service. And, sometimes maybe it's not all about the show. Maybe it's not. Maybe I didn't get the big standing ovation, but maybe there's a cocktail waitress that comes up to me, like this happened one time. Right. A cocktail waitress that comes up to me after the show and says, "Kat, I just went through breast cancer. I just had a mastectomy. Mm-hmm. I'm in recovery. I haven't laughed in a year. Oh, yeah. But you made me laugh. And then I did my job. Then I know that's what I was there for that night. So it's not really up to me. Mm-hmm. It's just up to me to show up, and then the rest happens.
And it manifests in you. It's as I listen to you, Kat, I say to myself, look, here's a woman who has raised a family all by herself, and she could have felt so sorry for herself, but no, she didn't feel sorry. In fact, she just got up on stage, she did her thing, people listened, and people could relate, and so she's a marvelous person. I really believe that about you, Kat, that there is something about your versatility and your approachability that makes you absolutely perfect for corporate functions, casinos, comedy clubs, and private parties. And I hope there is somebody in our audience who's listening to this, because I want them to hire you. You are very special. Now let's go back to some of the questions I have for you. Now, first of all, you have you're compared sometimes to some of the greats like Lucille Ball, Burnett, Red Skelton. I mean, these are icons in the field of acting and all the other things they do. Now, to be compared to those people, that must raise your ego like crazy.
Well, I don't know if it raises my ego, but I am humbled by it. I will tell you that. I am, because those are my people. You know, I grew up watching all three of those people and devouring every moment I could watch them on television. All my girlfriends were all about the boys and putting posters in their room of, rock bands. And I was in front of that TV as much as my mother would let me, watching, every episode of Lucy and Carol Burnett and the Red Skelton Show and the Smothers Brothers and the Funny and Cher Show. Any kind of, those great variety shows that, right. Gosh, I hope that they make a comeback one day, because weren't they great? We don't have any shows like that anymore.
No, we don't.
And I started out doing, Cher used to do these funny impressions. Mm-hmm. She would do these sketch comedy bits on her show, and the very first thing I remember doing is my mother would make me come out in front of company and go, "Oh, do that funny character, Olivia." I don't know, you probably don't remember, but Olivia was at the laundromat, and she had these long earrings, and oh gosh, she was just so funny. And my mother would make me come out and do Olivia, and that's kind of how I haven't done impressions in my life, and in fact, when I had shorter red hair, people would say to me all the time, "Gosh, you look so much like," I would get Jamie Lee Curtis, but I would also get Carol Burnett. Mm-hmm. And, being in Nevada in the casino industry where there's, legend shows and impersonator shows are a dime a dozen, if I had been able to put a Carol Burnett impression in my act, I do a Tarzan yell, but mm-hmm. if I had been able to put her in my act, I could have probably been working these casinos like crazy, but I admire her so much mm-hmm. that I don't want to impersonate her. I mean, she's an inspiration to me, sure. But I don't want to copy her, and I don't want to be her. And, in fact, when I first went to L.A., I took one stand-up comedy class by a gentleman named Steve Bluestein, who was Joan head writer. And I remember, talking about watching comedy, and I just watched it and went to it. And I'm surprised I didn't get kicked out of these comedy clubs, because I was a student, because I would go with my notebook, Susan. I would sit in the front row, and I would write, "Sam Kinison, he's yelling," and, this, I would take notes. I wasn't lifting material. I was taking notes on this profession that I just jumped into blindly with 2 feet, fully committed. Yeah. But I appreciate that likening to those three icons, and I think it might be also because I'm physical on stage. I mean, I'm a monologist certainly, but I use my body as my instrument. And when I teach my comedy students, how are you on stage? I just say, be who you are. I mean, unless you're in a character, which certainly you can do. Mm-hmm. But I'm very, right now I'm talking to you in my living room. I'm waving my hand around. My dogs are looking at me like I'm out of my mind.
No, you're not out of your mind.
I'm animated.
Yeah.
So I'm animated on stage. I work the stage. And then I also do my closing bit that I've done for years, my big pantyhose closer. That's very physical.
Wait a minute. Let's stop you for a minute. You do what?
My closing bit is it's a physical bit, and it used to be a pantomime, but I do it to music now. It's a whole spoof on pantyhose, on how the TV commercials make it look. It's always a sexy, beautiful woman, and she's sitting on a silk bed with her hair perfectly curled and tousled, and she's sexily putting on these pantyhose. And then I do what it really looks like in real life. And it is not all that sexy, but it's a very physical bit. Mm-hmm. And people often come up to me and go, "Man, how do you do that?" And I go, "Yoga. I go to yoga."
There you go. Okay, now let's talk a little bit about some of the people you appeared with, and I'd like you to tell our audience, what was it about them that made them fun to be with? Great. There must be some people that you can tell us about.
You mean like big stars or people you've never heard of?
Well,
I've worked with a lot of people you've never heard of.
Well, so it doesn't really matter, because some of these people who you never heard of may be even better than the ones you heard of. So
I'll tell you, Susan, working on the road with these comedians is like you are in the trenches with people who are your tribe. They know you, they get you. So if you happen to have a good bonding with them, you're forever connected. The very first time I went on the road, I had no idea where I was going to get my jobs. I had quit my day job. My calendar was completely blank, which Joan Rivers abhors. Oh God, you got to get that in the calendar. And I did this. I picked up this job, and the headliner. I'm also sort of a counsel profession. I did actually go to college and get a college degree in social services and corrections. Mm-hmm. And my dad, don't worry, you didn't really waste all that money. I do provide a social service, and when people heckle me, I correct them. So see, you didn't throw out.
And that's really interesting. So you're able to combine your comedy and also provide a social service, which is a really interesting thing because they're so very different. I mean, one is listening to people and understanding and trying to deal with their problems, and the other one is just being who you are and being funny.
Well, absolutely, and so I think it makes me I'm such an empath. I mean, I'm a very permeable being, so I really feel everybody's feelings. And the first week I went on the road, I was working with a headliner who had just gone through a heartbreak, and I could tell he was very, very sad, and I became his sounding board / therapist, and he spilled the beans to me about his, sadness, and I went over and just gave him a hug, and he just broke into tears, right? Oh. And then he said, what are you doing for the next 5 weeks? I said, I don't know, looking for a job. Well, he was going on the road for 5 weeks, and he called his agent, and he said, do I have an opening act? And they said, no. And he goes, I'd like to take Cat Simmons. So I quit that day job. I got the one job down in Oceanside working with Neil Edwards, and 2 days later, my calendar was full for 5 weeks. So it was just a miracle. But anyway, I love comics in general. Some of them have, very interesting backgrounds and quirkiness and stories, and I'm fascinated by them. I opened for Rob Schneider last year. I will tell you, I love to give people plugs that are really famous, but that are really cool people. Yeah. And Rob Schneider was very cool. I opened for him in Reno last year, and we all went out afterward. Just a humble, funny, sweet, non-arrogant kind of guy. Mm-hmm. And Tim Allen, same way. I worked with Tim Allen at the Punchline many years ago, and just as, when you meet somebody that you idolize, and it's a weird thing we do when we think, people are famous and we see them on TV, we think somehow they're better or different than us. Well, they're not.
No, they're people, right?
They're just not good at day jobs.
Right.
They had to go into show business.
Yeah, that's right.
If I had to have a day job, I would die. They would come into the cubicle and find me slumped over the computer before lunch. So I have to do this.
That's right. Now, I want to share something with you. I've seen a lot of comedians. I mean, haven't we all? And some of the comedians that I've met, I kind of learned something from them. Now, let me give you a couple of situations that I really loved. One was with George Burns. Now, some of the people in our audience are young, so they probably won't remember George Burns. But here he was on the stage. His wife had died, Gracie, of course, and he had a cigar in his mouth, and he stood there, and he was 98 years old. And he said to the audience, he said, when I'm 100, I'm going to play at the Palladium in England. And I'm telling you, this guy was so funny at 98 years old. And so I, being who I am, I went up to him and I said, George, you're an amazing person. How could you do what you do at 98 years old? And he said, sweetheart, I want to let you know that Gracie was my inspiration, and she's listening to us right now, and she's moving me on. She's waiting for me to turn 100. It was so wonderful. So my point is that even the greats, they're terrific. Now, you mentioned, what the heck is her name? You mentioned in a moment, our blonde, very funny, unfortunately dead comedian.
Joan Rivers.
Now, Joan Rivers, I saw her just before she died. And, she was in her 70s, and she got up on the piano. She lied down on the stage. She kept on jumping up. And again, here is a comedian who stayed funny at a later age and was able to move her body all over the place. So is there something about the way your profession kind of keeps you living a long life? I
think so. I mean, when you're a comedian, you focus on even disasters turn into comedy. So it's a way for you, it's a coping mechanism as well. Instead of staying in the disaster, you write a joke about it, and now you get laughs in it. And I think that, finding laughter and creating laughter and invoking laughter, it's a youth tonic, I haven't had any Botox or any fillers yet, but I'll tell you what, when I make people laugh, I do think it helps keep us young. And it's a perspective on life is what it is. I mean, sometimes miracles are just shifts in perception. And when you look at a potential mess in your life, like I'm on hold with a certain insurance company for half an hour, and smoke is coming out of my ears, I am writing a bit about it. So it takes me out of, and like I teach in my stand-up comedy class, when life gives you, really bad situations and you feel like you're a victim and you're in victim mentality, that is a downtrodden energy. But when you can flip it and write about it, and now you can invoke laughter from people about something that was, a negative, they're laughing. Now you go from being a victim to a victor. It's very powerful, and I think it's very liberating, and I think it's a youth balm. I absolutely do.
Love it. Now let's get our audience to know a little bit about your book.
Oh, yes, the book, Lifelong Dream there. The book and where I'm going to be, because I got some cool stuff coming up.
Okay, so let's talk about Cat's Daily Cups, your book. Tell us about your book.
My book, it was a labor of love. I started writing these blogs a long time ago, and they were called Daily Cup of Chaos. And then, because just so much stuff would happen, and here again, Susan, I would just write about it, and people would laugh and go, oh, my God, that really happened to you? I'm so glad that didn't happen to me. Funny for you. And then I got the idea of, hey, if I write a whole bunch of these chapters, maybe one day I'll be able to write a book. So I did start saving them all, and I went to go have some coaching by a dear friend, motivational speaker friend of mine last year, Donna Hartley. And she said, you really need to have some more merchandise at the back of the room. And I said, I know, I really need to write that book. And so she picked up the phone, and she dials the phone, and she goes, Pam, I have a new client for you. And she handed me the phone. Dun, 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 dun. That's how it happened. I was like, I would have procrastinated it and said, oh, I don't have time, money, I'm not organized enough, yada, yada. But I just did it. And I just came home, and my editor was amazing, and she guided me through the whole process. And then she suggested maybe we illustrate it. And I was like, well, okay, I wasn't really thinking. And the next thing I knew, my 17-year-old daughter was my illustrator, and 6 months later, Cat's Daily Cups was born, and it was launched the very beginning of June, and I'm selling copies, on Amazon and out of my van. So you can get them at Amazon, out of my van, or on my website. I will sign copies to people. I have a PayPal on my website, it says Cat's New Book. So people just go to my website, www. Do we really still have to say that after all these years?
Yeah, right.
Cat with a K, Cat Simmons SIMMONS.com. And they can get a book, and I'll sign it and mail it to them, or they can get it on Amazon if they want to do it that way. But,
now,
yeah, it's been a joy.
Kat, do you have the book in front of you?
I can go get one. Yes, I certainly can.
Okay.
I got a whole box of them right here in my office.
Okay.
Just got a whole, I just have to keep. I've got a lot of book signings coming up, so I thought I better stock up here.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I have my book.
Okay, so open up to a page and just give our audience a little snippet of what's in the book.
Oh my gosh.
Okay, just a little.
Okay. Oh boy. You want funny, or do you want inspirational, or? Okay. This is where I opened, and this is my daughter's first illustration. So I am a huge animal rights person. I love animals. I don't like to harm them. I'm an empath. So I write a lot of things about animals, and this is Chapter 9, Daily Cup of Moths. Animals come to me in groups at different times in my life for different lessons. This summer, it's all about moths. Sadly, I seem to have some kind of life cycle science project happening in my house right now. I'm invaded by these small gray moths that I suspect came in through the pantry. They just seem to appear, and I find them floating in the dog water, where I promptly scoop them out and put them outside to dry off. I am doomed because I cannot kill them, so I'm either a Buddhist or a neurotic. I would rather they go somewhere else, but I just can't wipe them out of my home right now. I did this dance for years with the sugar ants, and people would exclaim, "You have ants!" with a bit of fear in their voice. I would respond, "Yes, we do. Please be careful to not step on them." They finally moved on, and for that I am grateful. Anyway, that's just a little snippet. But a lot of these stories, my editor was brilliant because I just sent them. But they're categorized by a lot of stuff about parenting. Okay, parenting, animals, relationships, holidays, life, death, and awakenings. And I probably just got the best compliment ever. My girlfriend called me and she said, "My daughter who never reads picked up your book this morning." And I looked over at my 16-year-old daughter. She's devouring your book. She's laughing and she's crying. And she said, "Mom,
isn't that wonderful?"
That just happened right before you called.
Oh, that is so
wonderful.
Great, Kat.
Yeah.
I envy you in that sense, because when you have something that you do and people really love it,
right?
What could be better than that? But
I'm very lucky.
Yeah, you are, and I want that to continue for the rest of your life. Now,
thank you.
You mentioned your book and this little thing about moths. Well, let me tell you something that you might find interesting as well. I used to have a neighbor, and she was also an animal rights person. She loved dogs, she loved cats, she loved all kinds of animals. And one day, I took a look and I saw her sort of bending down on her lawn. And I went over and I said to her, "What are you doing?" And she saw a spider web. Mm-hmm. And even a spider web she would not destroy. So she literally picked up this spider web and she placed it in a very safe place where nobody would step on it or, destroy it or whatever. That's how strong she felt about animals.
Well, that's exactly what I would do. And I love that because I just have a reverence for all life, and this chapter goes on to explain about me finding a big old giant moth trapped in my garage light, me taking the garage light down and setting this moth free, and how it wouldn't go away from me and it kept flying back. So that moth story goes on for a while, but
now,
anyway, yeah.
Yeah, so if you opened up your closet and you found snakes, what would you do?
Oh, gosh. Well, I certainly wouldn't hurt them. I would probably have to get a snake handler over here to get them, In fact, I was just walking the other night in the desert and almost stepped on a rattlesnake. And people just love to kill those rattlesnakes and hold them up and show everyone, "Look, I killed this scary thing." And I look down and think, "Oh, there's a rattlesnake. I'm glad he's, What about if people were as smart as snakes? Like a rattlesnake warns you before it bites. I mean, there's a lot of men that I've dated that I wish had a rattle that could take their rattle before they bit me or hurt me, like, "Oh, danger, move away." But
okay, so before we end the show, I just give us another little taste, not from your book this time, but just if you were up on stage and you were doing an improv, you just got right up and you were standing in front of an audience, and and of course they paid to see you. So just give us a little snippet of something, maybe a joke or something like that.
Well, you know what? I don't really do jokes on the radio. You know what? My jokes are my stories. My act are stories, and it really depends on, you know, who I'm in front of. I talk a lot about women, and I feel like I'm the liberator of women. In fact, I'm getting ready to do. I want to make sure I get to talk about this amazing conference that I have coming up. Can I talk about that quickly?
Absolutely. Go for it.
Okay. So yeah, I'm going to be. I'm going to be at the Improv next week up at Lake Tahoe, inside Harvey's. And then after that, I'm going to be doing the Central California Women's Conference, September 20th in Fresno, California. And I can't wait for that because those are my favorite kinds of events because I feel I talk about what other women keep secret. So when they see me on stage, and let's suppose I'm talking about chin hair, for God's sake, okay? Now, I don't know about you, but I got a few, right? And I talk about how I have tweezers and reading glasses in every room in my house. I even keep them in the car because sometimes you get in that car and you look into that rearview mirror and you think you're perfectly coiffed, but you look up and, oh, there it is. You got a little chin hair. So I just keep a little mascara in the car, Susan, so I can mark that chin hair so that when I come home, because you'll never find it again, but just don't forget about it and then, like, walk into the bank because the lady will go, oh, my, you got a little something on your chin there. You know?
Oh, my God. I can't believe you do that, but I'm sure lots of people do it. Yeah, go on.
But they're stories, you know. I'm not like a set up and punch necessarily. That's why it's hard for me just to peel off a joke because they're all little vignettes. They're all stories about real life and in real situations, and so it takes a little more than just a joke. You know, I don't do barbershop jokes, as it were, or internet jokes or anything like that. They're all part of my story on stage, and every audience is different, and that's why I love doing these corporate events. Right. I'm also doing another event in Tahoe called Women's Wellness Weekend, and that's a real funky granola weekend. I did it last year, and oh, God, it was so fun. I mean, these women all came with their Lululemon yoga pants on and their Birkenstocks and not a stitch of makeup, and that was great. That was a completely – I love to perform for different audiences because it gives me an opportunity to learn more about them and to be their voice. Yeah. And I'm a chameleon. So I'm doing in a couple weeks on August 12th, I'm going to be up at Mont Bleu up at Lake Tahoe doing the Chevrolet International Vintage Automobile Association show. Now, that's going to be a bunch of guys with shiny cars, right?
And how much fun is that?
That's going to be really fun. And so I get to, when I do corporate events, I always write and I learn about them. Yeah. And that's why I love doing these kinds of events because I don't stay, you know, it's fluid. It's not just I do my same exact act. I do, you know, things for the American Heart Association. I love doing health and wellness events and survivors events because I believe in the healing power of humor. I mean, that's why I got into it. I read Norman Cousins' books, and I was like, wow.
That's the last thing I wanted to talk about. You just mentioned a very important name, and that was Norm Cousins. Now, you could tell our audience what happened with Norm. I'm sure you know. When you can laugh, there's a physiological thing that happens. It's just not a big yuck. I mean, your blood pressure is reduced. You increase your endorphins. It's also good exercise, but it can also cure cancer or help cure cancer. I can't say that, you know, you come to my show and be saved, but I believe, and once again, we're talking about longevity. I mean, sadly, there's longevity in comedy, and then there's a lot of people that take their own lives, it seems like. But if you can look at life lightly and you can learn to laugh, you can change your chemistry of your body. So I'm not actually a comic. I'm a psychoneuroimmunologist. Doesn't that sound impressive? Yeah. Wait a minute. Oh, my God. You know, I want you to be able to talk about that, Katz, but we've had you talk for almost an hour. I'm going to invite you back because I want you to talk about. Oh, yes. Absolutely. We would I'm sure the audience would love to listen to you more because you are just so inspirational and so interesting. So let's just call it quits for now. But we're going to invite you back. And I'm trying to move my mouth around. Last but not least, where can people see you perform in the next few months? You mentioned some places, but remember, our audience is all over the world. Is there
I know, and I'm not going to be anywhere close to where you are, unfortunately. But just to recap, next week I will be at the Improv up at Lake Tahoe inside Hardee's. If anybody's listening out on the West Coast, or you're going to be traveling to my beautiful backyard of Lake Tahoe, how lucky am I, right?
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
And then that other show, that's a private show, so no one can come to that. But then the Central California Women's Conference, September 20th in Fresno, California. Go to my website, katsimmons.com. You can see my schedule, and you can also see my the links for where I'm going to be. But that is a huge. Lisa Ling is the main keynote speaker, and I am the closing cool down speaker. I'm the cool down speaker, but I really hope I fire him up is what I hope for. So that's going to be amazing in Fresno, California. And then the Women's Wellness Weekend at Grand Labakan, try to spell that without looking, Grand Labakan in Tahoe City, California, November 12th and 13th. And, everything else I have right now is a private corporate event. But those people, those two events, people can come to those three events: the Improv, Central California Women's Conference, and Women's Wellness Weekend. Now, my tongue is having to try to move efficiently.
Yeah, so we'll wait until next time, and you'll talk a little bit more about what you're doing and a little bit more about your book. Something tells me you have another book that's going to come out.
Oh gosh, I think you're right.
Yeah.
I think you're right.
Yeah.
I mean, at the end of it, I was so over it. I just kept saying to my editor and my designer, I don't care. Just, it's fine. I don't care. And they're like, no, you have to care.
Sure.
But it was a labor of love, and it was a dream come true, and it was to honor a promise I made to my mom and to my uncle and to my other aunt, who always, they begged me for years. In fact, they tried to talk me out of doing comedy. My uncle said, if you quit doing comedy, this is when I first started 30 years ago, I will give you a computer. And I said, but you don't understand, comedy is writing.
Yes, of
But
course.
I made a promise to him I would do it. And my aunt was literally on her deathbed in Florida, as a matter of fact.
No kidding.
And I said, I promise you, Auntie Marilyn, I'm going to write that book. So I kind of had to do it. You know?
Yeah.
But now I'm so glad. And I'm just so happy that it touches people and makes people live. It's not all funny. There's a few tears to be shed because life isn't all funny.
No.
So, it's not just a big yuck book. It's a little bit about everything.
Yeah. Well, my guest today has been Kat Simmons, a 27-year veteran of the International Comedy Club circuit. And not only is she funny, but she's a real inspiration because she doesn't give up on anything. She just moves ahead, writes books, appears at many different places. And if you ever want to see somebody who you can relate to and somebody who you like very much, you have to go to Kat Simmons shows and buy her book. So, Kat Simmons, thank you so very much for being on the Susan Brender Show.
Thank you, Susan. I think there's a moth in the dog water. I have to go save it right now. So it's been a pleasure. Until next time, be well.
Okay, you too.
Thank you for listening to the Susan Brender Show. To be a guest, email sebrender@yahoo.com.